As long as he can.
Oh, yeah. Oh, God.
Yeah.
He's been on council longer than I've been alive.
There's been a few of those little ones bouncing around quite a bit.
1974 was his first term on this council. If you look at those photos out there, no, because he went away to Auckland for a while.
Yeah, but he would be the longest going back.
Yes, that's the first photo that he's in.
I move that we don't accept that.
Right, good afternoon, councillors, members of the staff. The stream is underway, so to anybody who's joined us on that, welcome along for this meeting of the Performance Policy and Partnerships Committee. On Zoom, Lindsay McKenzie and Pania Cook, Councillor Crackett will be joining us soon. And we have an apology from Councillor Abbott. Would somebody like to move that that's received? Councillor Lewis and Councillor Soper. I'll put that all in favour.
Aye.
Against, carried. No items of public forum. So we'll move into the minutes of Performance Policy and Partnerships from December 14. Would somebody like to move those true and correct?
I'll move those.
Councillor Pottinger seconded. Councillor Amundsen. Any matters arising? If not, I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Councillor Lewis, that brings us to the Wellbeing Fund Committee.
I'm happy to move those minutes, be a true and accurate record of that meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Second that.
Thank you. Second, Councillor Kett. Any matters arising?
No, thank you.
Put the motion. All in favour? Aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. The extraordinary meeting of Performance Policy and Partnerships from December 21st. I'll move that they're a true and correct record.
I'll second that.
Thanks, Councillor Soper. Any matters arising from that? If not, I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Which brings us on to the performance report for the 6 months. Patricia, do you want to... Jamie, do you want to grab the Norton chairs? Thanks. Councillors, I trust you've had a chance to have a read through. Anything in particular that you're wanting to draw our attention to?
Really, because this is the half-year set of accounts, so this is the closest sort of most easiest look we get to see what we've done for the last 6 months, to show that actually we are still operating on a net operating surplus for that first 6 months. It's a little lower than we forecast. but we are still, the forecast going forward is still looking good to be where we wanted to be on plan. We did note there was some income that was just a timing issue, wasn't there? So the NZTA claim for December. From a capital perspective, the forecast's been adjusted down now to 57.3 million for the year's delivery. That's against their planned amount of 73 million. But we have a number of big projects which we expect will ramp up in this last half of the year, that being Stead Street and the city block and the city streets first stage. So they will help that delivery. But we do note that the delivery of some of the pipe renewal project, the renewal work in Three Waters area is less than would have been desirable at this time of the year. So there is still some challenges in that space.
Thank you.
Other than that, from a KPI performance, levels of service, everything, there's some improvement on the last quarter, but it's pretty much the same again.
Jamie, anything you'd like to add?
Just on the capital side of things, so we are ahead of where we were last year. So last year we were sitting at about 11 million as at this time of year. So this year we're at 19, and normally Q3, Q4 is our busier periods, so we do normally get a good ramp up, subject to getting contractors, as you'll see with eroding. They're quite well below where they would normally be this time of year, and contractors are getting them lined up to do the work. Seems to be the biggest issue in that space at this stage. The only other thing I would like to add is just on the recommendations, under 4, in the third bullet point, it says restatement of the operating balances. It should be restatement of the opening balances.
Well, thank you. Malavik, if you can make that adjustment. So all things considered, bearing in mind COVID interruptions that effect on revenue, the tightness of operating in the contracting market, actually it's not bad. Down a little bit on where we were, and there's still, I guess, no indication of what's likely to happen over the next couple of months. We're in that heavy period of contracting work now. I know that we've had resealers working outside our house. They work. I initially thought it was an error on the big lighted sign that said 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. But no, it wasn't. That said, the crew that was on were super efficient. There was only one night that I kind of really noticed them. But you know, they're looking at these other options that affect traffic management. Stead Street, I think there was some hold-ups prior to Christmas, but it seems to be progressing really well, apart from the traffic inconvenience, of course. But the things that we need to be wary of sit within the report. Is somebody interested in moving the 5 recommendations, noting that change to opening balances rather than operating balances?
Prepared to move that way.
Moved
Mr.
Councillor
Chair.
Soper, seconded Ms Cook. Questions, councillors? Councillor Amundsen.
Thanks. One of the reasons I think we started with the roadmap was so that we could easily update the community about where the various projects are at. And on it's page 27 of board books, I'm not sure which page, but it's got the diagram with all the projects and stuff. Are we able to put something like that out through our social media or something, just to let people know, so that they, or put it on our website so that people can have a direct link to go to look to see how things have progressed over the last 6 months since approving the annual long-term plan?
Yeah, I think this is the plan, is to put it on the website, so we do have that communication out. And because this is our first time it's in the report, we'll get that onto the website as soon as we can.
Great.
Thanks, Councillor Amundsen. Any other questions? Councillor Clark.
Just referring to board books for those that want to scroll through. On page 26, there's a $3.2 million difference between forecast and actual expenditure. Is this it's in the line of subsidies and grants, is this the NZTA subsidy that you're referring to earlier in the report? So is that all that 3.2, is that likely to kick in the next quarter?
Half of it is to do with the NZTA
Okay.
subsidy, and the other half is the timing of money we get through the Three Waters and
Okay.
Shovel Ready coming
Sure.
through.
Okay. On page 28, it refers to the museum long-term planning having $52.5 million set there in the LTP. Does that include the storage, or is that just the museum?
So that was what was planned. That was what was discussed in the LTP.
In the LTP. Okay. On page 57, it talks about, there's a commentary there about He Wakatuia, and it talks about the digitalisation of access to the collection. Is this referring to the overall museum collection, or are you talking about just what's held by He Wakatuia and its partners?
No, it's the full collection.
Full collection, okay. And on page 66, I just need some clarification on the commentary there, and I'll read it here because I don't understand what it actually says. It says, subsidies, revenue, funding, time dependent on progress of Southern Museum and Art Gallery project. So I'm not sure what that actually means.
So that's you're saying the forecast on the subsidies and grants line was 179,000
Yep.
of revenue. What we've had none to date, and that's because that is all dependent on the timing of the project. So
Okay.
there's some subsidies put in
Yep.
there in relation to that project,
Yep.
which hits this activity.
Okay, fine. And just one last question, which is on page 71, where we have a line on borrowings, and you've got in there $89.5 million. Just want to be clear in my mind that that's against a New Zealand funding agency ceiling of around about 300 million. I don't want a precise figure, but is it reasonable to say that at the moment we have up to 3 times our income stream as a potential borrowing level from the NZ funding agency?
3. It's either 2.5 or 3.
Yeah, I think it's 3, but I think they're talking about scrolling it back to
It's
2.8.
about to
Yeah.
roll back down.
So that's quite a positive result, and that gives us some margins that we can potentially play with if we wish to at a later stage, because that's under a third of what we could be potentially borrowing.
Correct.
Yep, thank you. That's cool.
Mr. Day.
Thank you. Through yourself, Chair. Just wanted to remind councillors, yes, that is 280 that is available through local government funding, but a reminder that the current covenant under ICC is at 150, so just want to remind us of that.
Councillor Clark.
Just for as a reflection on what Michael just said, that restriction we have of 150, that could change by the will of council, though. Am I right with that, Michael?
Yes, through the Chair, that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
It is a self-imposed covenant.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, we go back to the recommendations. This is the 5 of them, as mentioned and amended, moved by Councillor Soper and Ms Cook. If there are no other questions or comments, I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you for that. Which brings us on to the activities reports.
Kia ora koutou, Mr. Chair, councillors. So we'll take the report as read, but I also want to highlight a couple of matters. In particular, there is some incorrect dates on the property records numbers. They are actually 2022, so apologies. We have a new team leader and it's her first time for reporting, but I can assure you that the LIMS and property file requests continue to come ahead. One disappointing factor for us was the percentage of non-notified resource consents not completed within the statutory 20-day time frame. I can assure you the team is well across this and looking at solutions to improve this number up from a low of 57% off the top of my head, and we are undertaking a review of the processes as well to make sure it's not just a linear process but it has some flexibility to combine different workflows. But welcome any questions.
So that process is underway now, Trudy?
That's correct.
Just in the next section for leisure and recreation, having a look at some of the figures around the library. Remote services seen an increase. Look, I just wanted to check on that figure. The My Book Bag figure, which is great. It's good that our services are still able to continue through the red traffic lights. I noticed that Southern District Councils are all online. 933% makes great reading. When you boil it down though to 3 the previous year to 31 in this last year, is the 933 right, Steve? I guess it is.
I can double check with the team, but I think one of the things we've seen over the past 12 months in particular is quite a significant shift to a different way of operating. And 12, 13, 14 months ago, we didn't have a need for an online service nearly as much as we do now. And I think that the point I was going to make to this report is actually the significant effort that is going into our services under this new COVID protection framework, and this is representative of that effort going into ensuring we're continuing to make our collections available.
I know there are a lot of extra services that have been introduced at the library which have had to go on hold, but they have looked creatively at how they're able to continue to provide for the new audiences that they've created. So the fact that they're working on that's really good. The summer reading program, for example, I remember our kids were hugely interested in that, and it's good to see that they've been able to continue to provide those. So good that those services continue, and looking at how some of the interaction with the community, the story walk, for example, looking at what's going on within the CBD. I think the new trending collection was another thing that's reflected in the report. What are the high demand books and getting more copies of them to reduce waiting time? So, looking at how they sharpen what they do is really encouraging. Any questions or comments from councillors on any part? Councillor Clark.
Yeah, just in relation to page 82, which refers to collection storage, and it makes reference to a new policy that there's some rationalisation of the collection and the rehousing, and I'm okay with that. The question I have, I guess, is how much of the current collection has been catalogued, given that last year the figure was 5%?
Through you, Mr. Chair, as much as the cataloguing is occurring, we're also identifying the scale and the scope of that collection as its entirety, and it's like the percentage is a shifting number. Unfortunately, I can't give you a hard and fast figure of it's now 6% or 7% or 70%. The team are working through a number of external consultants to assess the scale and the scope of our collection. Working with the SMAG board and making sure that the awareness is there of the size, and putting that program in place for when and if we need to move and pack that collection up.
Councillor Clark.
Just as a follow-up question to that, and maybe might be helpful given that we've got a meeting on the 15th of February, which is a week away, about the museum going forward. It would be helpful to know whether it's 6, 7 or 70%, because one of the debates that we'll get into is, should we catalogue a collection before we move it, or can we move it and subsequently catalogue it somewhere else? So I'm not trying to put Steve on the spot at the moment, but having a response to my original question by the following meeting would be helpful.
Yep.
Thank you.
Heads up there, councillor. Any other questions or comments on the items in the activities report? If not, I'll move the reports received. If there's a seconder.
Happy to do that.
Councillor Soper, thank you. And if there are no further issues, I'll put the resolution. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Councillors, that's all we have in open meeting. We'll be going to receive a couple of items in public excluded. So at this point, I'll thank those who've joined on the